CQ, CQ, CQ. This is Kilo 5 Charlie Lima Mike, and you are listening to the Everything Ham Radio podcast. Hello everybody and welcome to the Everything Ham Radio podcast. My name is Curtis, K5CLM, and I will be your host for this episode as well as pretty much every other episode. So, what are we talking about today? Today we are talking about packet radio, is what I call it. It's actually just packet, but I call it packet radio, so, hey, don't think less of me. Packet radio's been around for quite a while now. It's actually, came about in, the 60s, 70s, something like that, I believe. And it's had its ups and downs, okay? It's mainly just a text-based system, so it does have its limitations. But anyway, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. I got started in ham radio almost 20 years ago. Shortly after I got started, Packet was pretty big. I mean, it had bulletin boards all over the place, and it had digipeters all over the place, and humongous networks where you get pretty much anywhere in the U.S. at just a few connections. Well, it started to go to the wayside, or at least so I thought. When I first started in the club that I'm involved in, we actually provide disaster response for the entire state of Texas. And one of my responsibilities as the officer in the club that I was in was to maintain the computer hardware and the radios and stuff like that, and set up a pathway basically to connect to pretty much every major city in the state of Texas that we covered. And so I did that, and some were successful, some weren't. Some of them I had to use some of the major networks, like we're going to talk about in a little bit. Some of them were able to connect just by going station to station. And that was all fine and dandy for a little bit. A couple years later, probably about 5 or so years later, something like that, it really started to die off. Or at least so I thought. Maybe it was just in this area that it started to die off, or here in the state, or something. But I thought that it started to die off. Well, over the past few episodes, I've been doing these amateur radio club spotlights, as you all know, and 2 or 3 out of the ones that I've done, I guess 2 of them are the ones I've done, actually have a packet network set up in their city. And as a matter of fact, the club that I'm doing today also has one. It doesn't have full coverage of the city, but it has fairly decent coverage. So I asked myself, is Packet really dead like I thought it was? Or is it just dead in this area? Or did it almost die and it's making a comeback, or what? I did a bunch of research on this topic as I was getting ready for this podcast and the companion blog post that goes along with this podcast. And a lot of places that I read said that Packet was making a comeback because it uses, or APRS uses, the protocols that are built into packet radio. Okay, so I can understand that. I can understand how APRS using the packet protocols could have a effect on packet, but they're on 2 separate channels or frequencies. They have totally different reasons for being. I mean, APRS, as we'll talk about in the next episode, is for short text messages. It's for position reporting. It's for weather station reporting. But the primary purpose, or the primary use of it, it seems now, is vehicle or station location beacons or something like that, so that you can look at a map and you can see where that person is. Packet, on the other hand, isn't like that. Okay, Packet is a system that you can do keyboard to keyboard communications, kind of like text messaging or like a internet relay chat for those of you that are on the uh, upper geeky sides like I am. It can do bulletin board systems, and by bulletin board systems I mean a station that you can connect to, that anybody can connect to, and it has information on there, like a bulletin from your club. If you have a special meeting or whatever, you can put this text document on your bulletin board system, and your members can connect to it and read the information about the whatever the event is. You can also do it like for handling traffic on the national traffic system. It can go through there as well, and if you're the end area or whatever, you can put a message on there, and when that station connects to it, bam, they get that message. You can do it as like a email type server thing, where you can connect to the bulletin board. You can leave a message for somebody, and then when they connect to that bulletin board, they say, "Hey, I've got a new message," so they can log on there and they can read it. So it's kind of like a precursor, I guess, to the internet. It has a lot of the same features that the basic internet had 15 years ago. Now, can it do all the features that the internet can now? No, absolutely not. It can't transfer videos, it can't transfer pictures, it can't transfer large like Word documents or Excel sheets or stuff like that. But if it's just a regular standard text message or a text file, then you can do it. And that's the way that it was used quite a bit. And now I'm wondering, is Packet still being used in this way? The last two episodes they had, like I said, they had the Packet networks. They had a bulletin board that was still running. Are clubs using it that way still? I don't know. I might be interested really to find out. So if you're listening to this message in your club, or this podcast rather, and your club has a Packet radio system still active today, please leave a comment in the show notes of this podcast episode. I would love to hear how your club uses Packet. So, what else can it do, or what do you need to do it? I guess is the question that I'm looking for. Well, you basically need three things. You need a antenna, which is common for everything that we do as amateur radio. You need a interface to connect your antenna or your radio to your computer. And I actually skipped a spot there. You actually do need a radio, unfortunately. So you need an antenna, a radio, and then you need an interface that goes between your radio and your computer. And then you need your computer. Now, by computer, it could be a top of the line, home built gaming system or something like that, all the way down to a dumb terminal that doesn't have an operating system, that basically just shows information on the screen. Packet is very forgiving when it comes to stuff like this. Now, is it easier to use if you have a dumb terminal, or is it easier to use if you have a bigger computer, or faster computer, newer computer? That's left to be seen. I personally would take one of my old computers, one of my Pentium 1 computers or something like that, Pentium 2 computers, that can't run the new operating systems, or that can't run the games that I play or the programs that I use, or is really slow on the internet. That's the kind of computer that I would use, because you don't really need a powerful computer to use Packet, because like I said, it's just text-based. So how does it really work? Okay, the computer you run the program, and normally it's just a terminal program. This is just a text screen. It's kind of like going to your command prompt on your computer if you've ever done that. If you haven't, go to start and run and type in the letters CMD. That's Charlie Mike Delta, and hit enter. That window that pops up is basically the same thing as what you're going to see on your packet terminal screen. Commands are going to be a lot different, but that's basically what you're going to see. Your computer will take that information that you're typing and will transfer it through a wire. Normally, you'll go through a serial port connection. Now, you can get a USB to serial connection, and there might even be, I'm sure there's probably TNCs now that have a USB connection. So anyways, you connect your computer to your interface, which is called a Terminal Node Controller, or TNC for short. You hook into that, your TNC will take your digital information that your computer spits out and transfers it to an audio message, basically. It's kind of like in the older days, when you connected on dial-up, that modem sound that you heard, or like when you're sending a fax machine, a fax over a fax machine, and it makes that kind of noise. That's the noise that you hear if you actually listen to the packet frequency, or even the APRS frequency, or HF digital like RIDI or PSK31 or whatever. Those digital sounds is what the TNC makes. Okay, the TNC then takes that sound, transfers it to your radio through another cable, and your radio will key up and send it out over the air. Now, it could go directly to another station. It could go to a station that's 100 miles away. It could be your neighbor. But just like in pretty much everything else in amateur radio, it's not just to one person. Anybody can see this information. So, it sends it out over the air. Everybody receives it. Normally, it's going to be just the person that you're talking to that's going to be paying attention to it, though. So that's the key. When they receive your message, the process is reversed. It comes down through your antenna, through your coax, into your radio. Your radio transfers it to the TNC. The TNC changes it from an audio signal to a digital signal into your computer, and voila, it shows up on your computer screen. So, is this something that can still be used today? That is my biggest question. And I just don't know. Okay? The limitations of it, of just being a text-based system to use in a emergency situation, is very laxing. It's very minute in the information that you're trying to pass, and it's very, I don't know, maybe kind of backwards. Nowadays we have the internet, and we can send pictures. We can take pictures on our phone and send it over our phone to somebody else and show them what they're seeing, or do FaceTime or Skype or whatever, and do voice conferences and send emails at the click of a button, and going back to just a text-based system it really seems backwards. Now, is it useful? Maybe. I mean, if you have nothing else and you're trying to send information in a fairly quick manner, and you want to make sure that it's accurate when it gets to the other side, yeah, I can see that. I can see having a packet station at at the Red Cross station and the Salvation Army and the EOC and different agencies around, and sending messages back and forth between those things on stuff that you need. I can kind of see that. But I think it really is going to be as a last resort, because there's so many other things that are out there that could be better. Like Hamnet, for example. Hamnet, we're probably going to talk about here in the next couple episodes, so I'm not going to get too big into it. But with Hamnet, you use basically off-the-shelf commercial-grade routers. You reflash the hardware on it, put some high-gain antennas on it, and because it's operating in the ham band, you can use more wattage than a commercial grade can, and connect further, and you can use voice over IP telephone, you can do video conferencing, you can send files, you can make a website and host a website, make a form on a website or something like that that's hosted on this network. And if somebody needs a resource or something, they bring up this local web page, fill out the form, and it's done. It's sent to where it's supposed to send. So as Packet, I don't really know if, other than a backup to a backup to a backup, I just don't see it being something that's going to take off again. So now that we've talked about the features of Packet, the hardware that you need for Packet, let's kind of move on to the network or the infrastructure of Packet Radio. There are several networking schemes that have come and gone, or that are actually still in use in the Packet networks. Okay, the first one is digipeaters. That was the very first networking scheme for Packet Radio, and digipeaters would simply look at a packet that it received, and if its call sign was in the digipeater field, then it would resend the packet. This allowed for an extension of the range of a transmitting station, but it had a limitation because it would retransmit it, and then the next station would, retransmit it again if it was in there. And it worked fine whenever there wasn't a whole lot of packet traffic. But once it started to get more traffic on the air, more stations on the air, then it had problems because there was so much traffic that a signal couldn't get out, or two signals would collide, or two stations would transmit at the same time, and that information would be lost because there was no error correction built into that. So the next step up from the digipeaters was developed by Cantronics, and they're called KA nodes. Now KA nodes are basically the same thing as digipeaters with a slightly improved feature. Okay, KA nodes would repeat the traffic just like digipeaters did, but instead of, example here, I'm station A and I'm trying to send a message to station E. Okay, in my message I would have to type out station B, C, and D and E as my receiving station. So I would have to type in all those digipeater call signs in there on like a via statement. I would do like KC5PWQ via WD6KQ, comma N5TD, comma N60 or N6BG, comma K5CLM. That was a lot of call signs. Anyways, each one of those stations, as just a standard digipeater, would send the information. Now, if the third station in line happened to transmit when some other random station transmitted, and they collided and the message was lost, that means that my information packet, would have to be sent over the whole string of call signs again. Okay, so what the KA nodes did, and what Cantronics did, is they made it where each digipeater would acknowledge the previous station in the digipeater chain. So if station 3 collided with some other random station and station 4 didn't hear it, then it would only have to go from only station 3 would have to repeat it. So it did cut down on the traffic, and it did make it more reliable and had fewer timeouts, but it still wasn't a network, a true network. Okay, so along came NetROM. Now, NetROM was one of the first networking schemes to try to address the problem with digiputers. Now, in this situation, rather than having to know the exact path to get to somewhere, instead of having to actually list out those 3 call signs to get to the 4th call sign, I can actually connect to call sign A, or call sign B if I was call sign A, connect to call sign B, and then from there I could type in a command that would connect to station C, and then from there type in a command to connect to station D, and so on. And only those stations would digipute my information. Now, this did work a little bit better because you could actually, and this is actually how I found paths to some of the to the stations when I first started doing this. You could connect to a station, type in a command, and see every station that packet station had heard. Okay, and you're looking 20-mile radius, 30-mile radius, something like that most of the time. And I could say, okay, well, I'm going to connect to this station and see what stations he's heard, and then I'm going to connect to a station on that list and get a little bit further, do the same thing, see what they've heard, connect to another station, and basically zigzag my way to wherever I want. This worked to an extent, but it got to the point where it was like a lot of connecting to and trying to find my way down here, and it just really frustrated me. So, next thing really that came along was a system called, basically it was named after its author, G8BQP. That's George 8 Boy, or Bravo Papa Quebec. Okay, this came about in the early 1980s, and the author of it is John Wiseman, G8BQP. He wrote a personal computer to NetROM multi-TNC gateway that supported several other bulletin board systems. And it's still active today, or he is still active today, at least as of 2015. He still adds to the program. He still supports the program. It can be used on Windows or Mac OS, Linux, including one for Raspberry Pi. So you can do Packet on Raspberry Pi. It does support TCP/IP gateways, standalone packet networks, HF multi-protocol systems, and a framework to support many different kinds of fully emulated TNCs, like a software-driven one that uses your sound card rather than actually having a hardware TNC. So, really, I guess this G8BQP thing is more along the lines of kind of like a software interface rather than a hardware interface. So that could be one way to go if you want to do Packet. Okay. Next is RoseNet. Now, RoseNet, it was derived from the X25 protocols, which is basically what most digital systems are based upon. And each one of these Rose nodes had a static list of nodes that it could reach. So it knew that Station 1 knew that it could talk to 2, 3, and 7 all the time. So you could actually connect to Station 2 and then connect to Station 7, and it was like a guaranteed type thing. Now, this was one of the things that I used when I tried to connect to El Paso from the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I used RoseNet, and basically I would connect to a station in Fort Worth, the RoseNet station. I would go through RoseNet and connect to a station in El Paso. And that's, 600 miles from me, something like that, 700 miles from me. I'm sure that it probably went through some kind of TCP/IP internet link. I doubt that it went through a HF link, but more than likely it probably went over the internet. Now, this has some drawbacks. If the internet's down, then the connection's going to be down. So, how that's going to work is, if the internet's down, you might have to find some other way. Now, there also is the TCP/IP type of network, which uses the internet, the IP addresses, connects through the internet, more than likely, or like some kind of hardwiring system that can be used with Packet as well. The last one that we're going to talk about, since we are running really late, is the TextNet system. TextNet uses a 3-port switch that's designed to create a 9600 baud backbone that connects to other TextNet nodes, and then it has 2 local access channels that you can connect to it. So you can I connect to Fort Worth on TextNet, then can connect to Houston on the backbone and go out from there, and then one other person can connect to it as well. It also, I'm sure, it might have used like an HF maybe. Well, no, not with 9600 baud. It ain't going to use that. It probably used some kind of dedicated linking thing, like over phone lines or something like that. Is probably how it was. Now, like I said before, I don't really see Packet making some major comeback to the amateur radio community. I just don't see it. I may be wrong. If I'm wrong, I will admit it, but I just don't see it. So I think Packet is probably a dying art. It's probably going to be used more on a regional geographic area rather than a widespread, because I think there's just so much more out there and so much more technologically advanced that we can use to do the same thing as Packet and more. Like I said, I could be wrong. If I am, then that's great, or not great, but I'll admit it. So that pretty much wraps it up for this part of the episode. We're going to move on to this week's Amateur Radio Club Spotlight, where we're going to be talking about the Motorola Amateur Radio Club of Arizona. Hey everybody, welcome to the Amateur Radio Club Spotlight for this episode. Today we're going to be talking about the Motorola Amateur Radio Club of Arizona, or MARCA for short. You can find their website at www.w7mot.org. That's William 7 Mike Oscar Tango.org. You can find the links to this and several of the other links in the show notes for today. Now, let's see. The Motorola, or MARCA, they have several things that they do. And I'm just going to top this off with saying this. It seems like several of the clubs in the Phoenix area really got together and seemed to work really great together. One of the things that they have is their newsletter is like all one newsletter. So it's really kind of neat. But we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. Some of the activities that MARCA does is they maintain and operate about 24 repeaters. That's 24 repeaters located on Arizona mountaintops and the Phoenix area. Now they actually have several in the Phoenix area, Scottsdale, Mesa area. Then they have several of them, like they have one in Flagstaff, they have one in, I believe it's Kingman, I think. They have several of them. They have regular analog repeaters, they have D-Star repeaters, they have System Fusion repeaters, they have APRS digipeaters, they have Packet digipeaters. They have a lot of repeaters. Now, They also do things like the AWR Field Day, like most of them do. They typically hold their system or their station near Fort Lakes, Arizona. They do several ARRL contests. They do antenna construction. They climb towers. I need somebody to come and climb my tower right now. I got to take it down here next couple weeks. So if y'all want to come over here to Texas, come on. You can take down my tower for me. That would be awesome. There are groups or individuals in the club that are active in HF, voice HF, digital, CW, DXing, mesh networks, EOC operations, contesting, several things. They actually have a really neat presentation in their files database that you can access about the mesh network and the experiment that they did. And by the mesh network, I mean Hamnet. And they talk about how they set up like 3 or 4 different stations, and several of them were like 16, 17 miles away from each other. And one of those stations was like in the back of a Jeep with the directional antenna on it. So I really like it. I really like that little file thing. It really kind of piqued my interest and pointed me in a direction that I need to go to accomplish something here in my local county that I've been kind of curious to do. So, back to the club. They hold their meetings on the 3rd Tuesday of each month. Their meeting starts at 6:30 p.m. and typically last about 2 hours. Their agenda is typically a business meeting lasting about an hour, followed by a presentation of interest by a guest speaker or a club member. They hold their club meetings at the Denny's on Broadway, south side of the street, just east of Priest Road. The actual address is 1343 West Broadway Street in Tempe, Arizona. If any of y'all are in that area around that time, actually it will be the day this podcast goes live that their meeting will be. So if you're in the Phoenix area and you're listening to this podcast and you got a couple hours to spare, head on over to the Marca Club meeting and tell them I sent you. Now, you can find a list of all the repeaters that we talked about earlier on their website, as well as a map of each of the repeater locations that they have. Links to both of those pages are in the show notes. So head on over to everythinghamradio.com/podcast/5. That's the number 5 to get these show notes and the companion blog post to this episode. Like I said, their website has a very extensive file depository, as well as a article depository on several different items. They have stuff, like I said, about the mesh network. They have articles about APRS, National Traffic System, software-defined radios, just loads and loads of information on there. There's a lot of stuff that I actually downloaded from their website while I was doing research from it. So thank y'all very much for putting all this information on there and sharing this with the amateur radio community. If you have not checked out their website, which you probably not have done, head on over to there now. Again, their website is w7mot.org. The link will be in the show notes. So head on over there, check out their website, check out their file depository, and send them an email telling them thanks, because I'm sure you find it as interesting as I did. Now, I guess that's about it for this club spotlight. I want to tell everybody, if you would like your club mentioned in an episode of the Everything Ham Radio podcast, send an email to me with the website address of your club, where you're located, and give me some information about your club, something that you want me especially to mention. A lot of the information that I get, actually all the information that I've gotten so far, is just off the website. I actually haven't talked to anybody before I recorded the podcast on any of my episodes so far. But if you want yours on here, send an email to K5CLM, that's Kilo 5 Charlie Lima Mike, at everythinghamradio.com. Again, put the website address, the name of your club, and something about it. Maybe your meeting dates or whatever. Please make sure that your website is up to date, because like I said, I get a lot of information from your website. And that's really one of the criteria that I've been using to select a club, is that they have an up-to-date website. Nothing frustrates me more when I'm trying to go to look for some information and the latest information on their website is 2 or 3 or 4 years old. I myself had made this mistake on my club website, so please make sure that's up to date before you post or before you submit it. Or at least give me a lot of information about your club. But if you want visitors to come to your website and you don't have it updated, that's going to look bad on you. So update the website, send me the information, and that's about it. So I guess that's about wraps it up for this episode. So I guess we'll move on. Hey everybody, once again I'd like to say thank you for listening to this episode of the Everything Ham Radio podcast. If you like what you heard here, head on over to our website. There's lots of information there that I'm sure you're going to love. You can find it at everythinghamradio.com. While you're there, subscribe to get emails on when I publish a new post or a new podcast. You can click on the subscribe button at the top of the page or go there directly at everythinghamradio.com/subscribe. Also, like me on Facebook at facebook.com/everythinghamradio and follow me on Twitter at K5CLM. Also, I would greatly appreciate it if you would subscribe to this podcast, like it, share it with your friends, help me spread the word. So until next time, 7 free.